Okay, let's jump right in. Welcome back to today's explainer. Look, we all hear a ton of noise about artificial intelligence right now, but today we're digging into something highly specific. We're decoding some incredibly urgent and honestly fascinating warnings from a former Google insider. We're going to map out an exact, timeline-driven forecast of massive AI job disruption. We're talking about a shift that scales from the software on your laptop right down to the fundamental structure of the global economy. So grab your focus because this is a roadmap you really need to understand.
So, I want to kick things off by framing this whole explainer around one massive structural question. What actually happens to capitalism when human labor is no longer needed to generate profit? Right? I mean, this isn't just some abstract philosophical debate you'd have in a dorm room. It's the core macroeconomic reality of everything we're about to discuss. Think about it. If you remove the human worker from the equation of producing goods and services, it triggers an absolute domino effect on how we live, how we earn, and how we spend.
Part 1. The AI Job Pyramid. Who exactly is getting disrupted first?
To figure out how that domino effect actually starts, we've got to look at who is in the crosshairs first. And honestly, it completely flips the traditional script on automation. Because, most people just assume disruption always starts at the absolute bottom, right? The blue-collar manual labor. But the insider points out that the real immediate threat is sitting right above that, in the lower mid-layer. We're talking about entry-level knowledge work, those mundane, repetitive computer tasks. And from there, the erosion just kind of climbs upward. It moves through advanced knowledge work, hitting paralegals, financial analysts, doctors, and eventually aims straight for the top layer of leadership. So the robots aren't coming for the bottom first. The software is coming straight for the middle.
And we're not just speculating about some distant future here. Take Anthropic, for example. They estimate that roughly 15% of entry-level knowledge jobs can already be handled by AI today. 15%. Now, you might be wondering, well, why aren't we seeing mass panic yet? Well, it's because this disruption is starting silently. It's not showing up as these massive headline-grabbing mass layoffs right out of the gate. Instead, it's taken the form of quiet hiring freezes. Companies simply aren't backfilling those digital entry-level roles. The door is just quietly being locked.
This actually highlights a pretty counterintuitive reality we're living in right now. Like, think about a carpenter or somebody restoring classic cars. They're working in this highly tactile, unpredictable physical environment. And honestly, they're largely safe for now. There just isn't a robot out there agile enough to do that cost-effectively. But if your job involves sitting at a call center, booking travel, or essentially clicking around on a digital interface all day, that environment is perfectly primed for an AI agent to just navigate and take over. Basically, it turns out that a physical hammer is way harder to automate than a computer mouse. So let's break down how this builds chronologically, at least based on the insider's forecast. Right now, we're in that phase of silent hiring freezes. But you might want to mark your calendars for 2027. That's the year the source predicts we'll see a very serious, highly visible impact sweeping right across the knowledge worker layer. And pushing past 2030, the erosion doesn't stop. It climbs right into mid-management and complex diagnostics. In fact, artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is projected to eventually do everything better than us. And yeah, that actually includes the job of a CEO.
Okay, moving on to Part 2, the rise of robotics. The hardware disruption.
Now, this disruption is definitely not going to stay confined to our laptop screens. While software eats up the white-collar jobs, hardware is gearing up to step right into the physical world. There's this striking anecdote from the source material that really drives this home. Figure AI recently put a humanoid robot on a production line sorting packages. Its job was to locate a label and make sure it faced downward. It did this for 8 straight days. Whenever its battery got low, it just walked over, plugged itself in, and then got right back to work. And the kicker? It eventually outperformed the human working right alongside it. This really proves that high-level, repetitive, physical automation isn't just science fiction anymore. It's incredibly effective, and it is already here.
10 billion. Let that number sink in. That is the sheer scale of the upcoming disruption, based on Elon Musk's prediction that humanoid robots will soon outnumber the actual human population on Earth. Just think about the manufacturing scale required for something like that. We are talking about a physical labor force that is literally manufactured on an assembly line, updated via Wi-Fi, and deployed by the millions.
But here's the crucial thing. We shouldn't just be looking over our shoulders for humanoid robots like the Tesla Optimus. I mean, yes, they're coming, but they require intensely complex training to navigate a world that was built for humans. The much faster, more immediate wave of disruption is actually going to come from specialized robots. A self-driving car, that's a robot. A Boston Dynamics dog replacing a soldier on a battlefield, also a robot. These specialized machines don't need to look like us or act like us.
And because of that, they're going to start replacing millions of specific function-based jobs way sooner.
Which brings us to part 3, labor arbitrage, the economic shift. Let's zoom out for a second. We've talked about individual jobs, both digital and physical. But what does this massive technological shift actually mean for the very foundation of our global economy? Well, we are looking at the potential end of labor arbitrage. Now, to really grasp this, we need to define what that actually means. Labor arbitrage is just the traditional capitalist principle of using labor and capital to create a product for much cheaper than you sell it for, right? You pay a team to make a pair of shoes, and then you sell those shoes for a profit. The entire engine of global capitalism is built entirely on extracting value from human labor.
When you compare the old world and the new world, the contrast is kind of mind-blowing. In traditional scaling, businesses hire human employees and they track man-hours. And that comes with what the business world tends to view as bloated, emotional costs. You know, things like benefits, HR, sick days. But in the AI economy scaling model, companies just buy AI compute. They're tracking digital tokens instead of human hours. It becomes an incredibly predictable, constantly cheapening fixed cost. For a CEO who's relentlessly chasing efficiency, this new model isn't just attractive, it's practically an irresistible force.
But here is the massive structural flaw that the source identifies. If the cost of labor essentially drops down to just the cost of investing in a machine, well, everyday workers lose their paychecks. And if they lose their paychecks, they lose the purchasing power required to buy the very goods those highly efficient machines are churning out. You end up with this highly optimized economy capable of producing endless, dirt-cheap goods, but an unemployed population that is completely unable to actually buy any of it. It's a total paradox.
Part 4. Risk of civil unrest, the societal fallout.
And this brings us to some of the darkest warnings in the source material regarding the societal fallout of an unchecked AI economy. Because this isn't just about balance sheets, it's about the very fabric of our society. 20%. The Insider really emphasizes this number to remind us that we absolutely do not need 100% job displacement for the global economy to fundamentally break. Think about it. If we hit just 10 to 20% systemic unemployment and you combine that with ongoing inflation, economies are going to begin to spiral downward at a terrifying speed. The system simply isn't built to sustain that kind of structural shock.
The Insider paints a very stark picture of what could happen next. They warn that severe, rapid economic displacement of this magnitude could directly lead to civil unrest. Now, from their perspective, deeply corrupted political systems are currently just completely ignoring the public's best interests. The source argues that when people realize their tax dollars are being mismanaged and they're being structurally locked out of this new economy, public anger is going to reach a boiling point. Now, to be clear, we are just reporting the Insider's viewpoint here, but they are clearly signaling that massive job losses could be the catalyst for a total breakdown in societal order.
So what exactly is the fix? Well, the Insider outlines a few absolutely urgent interventions. They argue that governments must immediately wake up to the reality of AI scaling. They suggest we need to start preparing massive safety nets, kind of like the COVID-19 furlough schemes, just to financially sustain displaced workers. And critically, there needs to be an unprecedented focus on societal reskilling. We literally cannot just let millions of people fall through the cracks of this transition. They have to be supported and they have to be redirected.
Part 5. Shifting Tech Narratives, Silicon Valley's Spin.
Now, we have to ask, who is actually driving this transition? Let's shift our focus to the Silicon Valley leaders themselves and examine exactly how they are managing and, frankly, changing the public narrative around all this disruption. And we've got to bring out the receipts here. Back in 2015, and then again in 2023, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman explicitly stated, "My job is to help people destroy jobs," and that jobs are definitely going to go away full stop. This was an era of, doom-laden honesty. Why? Well, because back then, the primary incentive for tech leaders was just getting the world and investors to take artificial intelligence seriously. They literally needed to sound the alarm to build the hype.
But flash forward to 2024, and Altman's tune completely changes. Suddenly, he's out there saying, "I don't think we're going to have the kind of jobs apocalypse that some of the companies in our space advocate." It is a massive, completely softened, heavily PR-friendly pivot from his own words just a short time earlier. It's almost visual whiplash, right?
And honestly, the logic behind this sudden narrative shift is entirely predictable. This pivot coincides directly with the huge rise in public backlash. People are starting to wake up. We're seeing tech leaders getting booed at commencement speeches, and even physical pushback against data centers. AI companies are waking up to the fact that if the public views them as a direct threat to their livelihoods, those same people will elect politicians who will heavily regulate them. So the narrative suddenly shifts from apocalypse to everything is going to be just fine, purely to protect their massive commercial enterprises.
Which really drives home the insider's powerful point about trusting actions over words. Just compare how two leading AI companies handled a highly lucrative but ethically questionable military-related contract. Anthropic flat out refused the human targeting and surveillance contract. They actively chose to lose out on a $500 million deal and just to stand by their stated ethics. OpenAI, on the other hand, they accepted the associated contract shortly after, prioritizing revenue and the growth of their commercial enterprise. You know, when billions of dollars are on the line, ethics get tested pretty quickly. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought to close out today's explainer. In an era of carefully managed PR scripts and sudden narrative pivots, are we actively watching the actions of the tech leaders building our future, or are we just blindly listening to their words? The timeline for AI disruption is moving incredibly fast, and honestly, understanding the true motives of the companies behind the wheel might just be the most important skill we can develop right now. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today, and as always, keep questioning the narrative.